Hey guys, welcome to the episode 1 of the new poker show called PLOspectives, where we explore unbeatable strategies within the great game of Pot Limit Omaha. We take one hand, go through the action, and see how each party should have played their hands and how they should construct the ranges. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at a hand that I played recently at the PLO 200 tables. As you can see, Hero is in the big blind, having single suited Ace Queen Jack 6. Cutoff opens preflop, button and small blind fold, and we have a decision whether we want to cold call or 3-bet. Folding is not really an option. So I'm gonna start with preflop sim, and in my case this is the PLO 200 zoom rake structure. As you can see, double suited version is a 3-bet, all the rest combos are a call, and the hand with 4 suit is just a fold preflop. Makes a lot of sense. This hand has decent hand strength and doesn't really want to be 3-betting here out of position. So calling makes it much sense and the best play. We call and we see a flop of King 10-5 with the flush draw, which gives us the nut wrap, absolutely massive, as well as the nut flush draw. And the question here is whether we want to start leading or check raising. And to understand that, we're gonna look at the flop sim. On the flop, solver likes to split our hand into 60% check-in and 40% leading range. That being said, once we check and face a c-bet, we are going to always check raise our hand, which makes a lot of sense too, because we're slightly, well, no, we're flipping against sets, which is the worst case scenario, and we can heavily dominate other type of draws. So check raising makes sense, but we didn't choose that line, so we're gonna explore the leading range. Because we do take a lead on the flop, which is, as we now know, absolutely fine strategy. And in this specific hand, our opponent didn't seem to be c-betting often enough, and I didn't want to be giving away free cards here in position. And also wouldn't mind to start building a pot here for the future runouts when we hit our draws, one of our draw. So we lead and get called, but let's also take a look what other type of hands prefer to lead on the flop. How is our leading range constructed here? So when we construct our leading range in this spot or out of position in general, we want to be looking for the next key elements like poor playability after checking, nutted equity or future nut blockers, blockers to opponent's continuing range, and backdoors. So the more you have of those elements, the more natural, so to speak, lead becomes. For example, let's say a hand like, for example, King Jack Jack Deuce with the single heart, Jack of Hearts. So having a king blocks some of the mate hands from our opponent's range, like set of kings, as well as two pairs like King 10 and King 5. Two jacks block some of the Queen Jack combos and other type of straight draws. Jack of Hearts specifically blocks some of the Broadway flush draws that our opponent could potentially have. So this hand makes a lot of sense to start leading here on the flop. Benefits a lot from opponent folding his share of equity right away. What else? And like Ace Queen, 6-3, Ace Jack. We're gonna see a lot of like scrolling up and down here through the leading range column. We're gonna see a lot of hands like King Jack Jack, King Queen Queen, 10 Jack Jack, 10 Queen Queen, Ace Jack, Ace Queen with some backdoor straight draws and flush draws. even a hand like ace 10, 7, 8, something like that, jack 10, 9, those are all elite. King, queen, queen, you can see here. Ace 4, 7, 5 with the nut flush draw and the backdoor flush draw, also elite. Like all those hands have in common that they have at least one or no, I think at least two or three, even three of those key elements that we mentioned earlier. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense and that's pretty easy to understand. So let's continue. As we get called here on the flop, we see a turn of 8 of clubs. And the question is whether we want to double barrel our hand or do we want to check call or maybe check raise. And we're going to look at the term sim that I ran specifically for this spot and this stack sizes. And we can see that once we choose lead in range on the flop or to lead with our specific hand on the flop, we are going to always double barrel our hand. And if we take a look what type of hands else prefer to double barrel here, we're gonna see that those are mostly hands that either picked up additional equity on the turn, like I don't know, king 997. I saw a hand here somewhere. Jack 10 9 would still double barrel in, or hands that don't really care, like mine, don't really care about the runout, that still has a ton of equity. Yeah, ace king 4 5 would be a double barrel with the ace of hearts. Ace jack 6 7 now also picked up ace jack 6 7 with the flush draw, which now also picked up an open ender. Those hands will go ahead and double barrel. In terms of which hand we check raise, it's going to be mostly value hands that don't block river runouts, like set of kings, tens, eights, a lot of king 10 with some additional equity, some king 10 with flush draw, for example. But you can see a lot of kings here in this in the right column, and they all unblock, or like many of them unblock our opponent's stabbing range as well as don't block any of the river potentially board changing runouts, like straight in runouts that benefit from getting the money in on the turn and not having to play in a guessing game on the river. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. So let's get back to our actual hand. Here on the turn, we decided to double barrel, which we now know is completely fine play. And our hero calls again. Please hit. We have so many outs. Boom. That's a 4 of diamonds. That's the brickiest brick of all possible bricks. That's unfortunate. We did not hit our draw, but nonetheless, we need to decide what do we need to do right now. Whether we want to triple barrel as a bluff now, or we just pretty much give it up. And when considering turning a hand into a bluff, well, one of the main reasons, or one of the main elements to watch for is we want to be unblocking our opponent's folding range. Like if you think, well, what type of hands would our opponent fold on this runout? Those would most likely be like busted flush draw, busted straight draw, something like that. But since we block all of those hands ourselves, it makes it so much more likely that our opponent actually has a value range here rather than draw. and for that reason we prefer to just give up with this hand. If I show you a sim, solver will tell you the same. Our specific combo is a 100% give up here. I think named the reasons earlier makes a lot of sense. So we check and our opponent checks back and shows queen, queen, jack 10. And I think he played his hand absolutely fine as well. I'd say both parties played their hands pretty much standard and correctly. I'll show you versus a step in position who has queen, queen, jack 10 with hearts. Should not be raising, 100% call. And the same should be on the turn as well. Same as on the turn. In position has showdown value in form of queens. He wants to get them to showdown. Raising doesn't really make sense because he doesn't want to isolate himself versus the stronger part of my range. He wants to keep my range as wide as possible. At the same time, he also has a decent amount of outs times when he's behind on the turn, for example. So calling flop and calling turn makes a lot of sense. And on the river, once check to him, queens are not strong enough to be value betting, but so they just take the showdown and win the hand in this case. So that is for the leading line. I also ran multiple sims for the check raising line and how we should continue on different runouts on the turn. And interesting thing that on the turn we mostly check. We only continue barreling on a heart or on a 6. Like 6 is the only blank that I found that we continue barreling, because I suppose because we also pick up additional 2 outer for trips, and altogether that gives us kind of allow us to continue barreling here. But all the other blanks we play as a check call, because in position will also have a lot of slow plays on this board. So for example, if I open turn sim, that's the turn, right? And I enter kings here, so that's turn. Oh, no, that's the wrong sim, right? That was flop lead. All right, never mind. Don't have it open at the moment, but the thing is, once we check raise, our flop check raising range will consist of a lot of not flush draw type of hands, like different types of not flush draw. So we continue barreling on a flush completing runout, which makes sense, but on all the blanks we check, as well as we check on paired and straight completing runouts. But the different strategy between those runouts is that on a blank we are going to check call. On a straight completing runout we are going to check raise, most likely. Like there is some balance in solver, but we can just simplify to check raise. And we're going to check fold on paired runouts, pretty much regardless of the bet size of in position. So why we check call on a blank is because, as I said, our flop check raising range will have a lot of a draw type of, or should have a lot of draws and like blockers around the draws. And in position we'll have a ton of slow plays on this board, like even not all, like a lot of kings are just calling flop raise, a lot of tens and king 10 type of hands just call on the flop versus check raise to see that turn shift in equity, to see kind of safe turn before getting the money in. So because of that, we don't want to run into like a very top hand and stacking off as an underdog. But we do have absolutely enough and more than enough equity to just check call on the turn versus any type of hands. Yeah, on a paired runout, we're gonna check fold. even to half pot size step from in position, because we pretty much only have reverse implied, and even when we hit our hand and our hand will actually be good, it's gonna be so hard um, to get paid off, to extract any more money from in position player. So that's why. I think I named them all, right? So we, once again, just to repeat the check raising line, we're gonna barrel hearts and a six. Pretty much we can simplify it to all hearts, because six will, depending on your other card, will change sometimes. But it's easier to remember that we're gonna barrel hearts, we're gonna check call all blanks, we're gonna check fold all pairs, and then on the straight completing runouts, we're gonna balance it out between, we're gonna split between checking and check calling and check raising, depending on maybe the type of opponent, the exact cards that we hold, etc., etc. The meta game, the tendency, whatever. So I think that's gonna be it for now. Thank you guys for watching. Stay unbeatable and see you next time. Take care. I'm your PLO Bull Flares.